Well, we all know what it's like to be in that alone spot, don't we? That Herb was talking about. We are facing a situation we weren't prepared for, and just don't know what to say or do. And that is a situation that happens to all of us. Last time we talked a little bit about Episcopalian or Anglican theology, kind of our way of sort of doing business and thinking through issues about life. That we use reason and scripture and tradition, and those words are bigger than just those words. Reason is, all of experience, all of the parts of the human mind and emotion. Scripture, obviously, and tradition, and we take all three and we use them to reflect on what it means to be a human being. As we reflect on the mystery of God and the mystery of life and the mystery of being human together. And as we do that reflection, we obviously center much of our attention on Jesus Christ. That in Jesus on the cross we see something about God and about ourselves that's really essential for our way of being human, and is essential to the tradition that we are part of. And of course, as we talked last time, we see Jesus in lots of different forms up there, both kind of pretty, and sometimes this is a Jesus who looks pretty uncomfortable and is pretty devastated, and maybe a Jesus who's just died. And there is something essentially evocative about that. There are in Scripture many different traditions, several different traditions around where is God when bad things happen, as we discussed last time. That from Ecclesiastes, this is just one of the great ones. I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. Most of the time in our culture, we're only aware of the part of Scripture that tells us that God is sort of seems to be in control of everything. And yet, as we have discussed, and I think as many of us have experienced, to think of God as controlling everything, it doesn't quite work out. One can hardly figure out God's math. If God is controlling everything, you'd think God would be more skillful. As a parent, I have two 15-and-a-half-year-old daughters. There are certain kinds of things that I can provide for them. But as they grow, I'm less and less able to kind of control their environment or their decisions. I have to sort of give them to the world. Time and chance can happen to them too. And if time and chance happen to them in a way where they were hurt, I would be devastated. But this is part of our tradition. A deep part of the Jewish tradition and Christian tradition is to use stories to talk about the character of God. And perhaps the most central story in the Jewish scripture is this one. The people of Israel are enslaved in Egypt. And God goes out to Moses, who's kind of a discredited Egyptian official who's murdered a guard for being mean to a Jewish slave. And the Lord walks up to Abram basically out in this burning bush thing, or Moses walks up to God in the burning bush and says, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering. Do you notice that there's kind of a spatialness to this? That there's kind of God is first observing almost from a distance. And then as God gets closer to the scene, God can hear. And then the story tells us, indeed, I know their suffering. In the Jewish religion, this is the core of their faith. And if you read all of Scripture, word for word, page for page, and you miss this, you miss the heart of Judaism. You also miss the heart of Christianity. But then notice what happens here. God says, I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land flowing with milk and honey. That sounds great. Why can't God sort of come down in some sort of large bus system and take them all over there right now? But that isn't in fact what God chooses to do. God says, the cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I also see how the Egyptians oppress them. So, come, I will send you, Moses, to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. So even here in the heart of Judaism is the sense that God is not going to come in and just totally scoop them up out of Egypt like with some kind of Star Trek transporter beam and move them over to the land of Egypt. That God is somehow in partnership with human beings about how things operate in the world. We talked last time about how the Bible is not really a philosophy book with easy to identify quotes, despite the fact that's kind of what we want it to be. We sort of expect it. But rather it is kind of a debate between people of related but different perspectives, often in story and poetry, about what life is like. So you can go through Scripture and you can take out a quote from here and a quote from there, and you can make it mean almost anything. But that is not deeply respectful to the text. Each text is speaking in its own context and is speaking from a certain perspective. And the people who put the Bible together ultimately tried to keep many different perspectives in it, because they wanted to respect different views, because they realized that truth was bigger than any one perspective. But quite generally, in the Jewish and Christian community, they believed that God was in fact involved in the world. Some of them felt that God was in control. Some of them put greater weight to chance, that God allows chance and risk to take place. But all believed that this issue is really deeply a mystery and kind of defies easy explanation. In the book of Job, as we talked about last time, Job basically is said that he was right in the way he talked about it, but that his friends were wrong because they kept telling Job that it was his fault and there were easy answers about it. And God ends up asking Job to pray for his friends who thought they knew all the smarty pants answers about life. Okay? And God says, it's tougher than that. So I want you to watch a movie with me here for just a minute. This is a movie called The Truman Show. You ever watch that movie?
Yeah.
Okay. I like that movie. I like that movie. Cue the sun. I like that movie a lot. We're going to be watching basically the last 7 or 8 minutes. Truman has been, unbeknownst to him, a star of a TV program in a huge dome that can be seen from space. And he's the primary actor, but he doesn't know he's an actor. And the director is controlling his life, his girlfriend, his best friend, everybody on site, everybody that he knows is an actor paid to play a part. Truman is not free. But over the course of the movie, he comes to find out that he is, in fact, not free, and he begins to see all the cracks in the world about him. He begins to sense that somebody is controlling what's happening with him. And so, despite his fear, he heads out onto the water in a sailboat. The same sailboat on which his dad apparently died earlier. And Truman decides that he wants to be free and that he wants to no longer have his life controlled. And so the people that you're going to see here in just a minute are in the control room trying to make Truman go back to land, trying to get him back to play his role in The Truman Show. And I want you to watch what Truman does as he's confronted with this choice of whether to accept a safe world or to accept a world of chance.